is the 2022 Audit and Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. Finance Director Wolf.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. This is the 19th year the city has prepared an annual comprehensive financial report to date. All 18 previous annual financial reports were award winners. In our continued pursuit of excellence, the latest annual report will again be submitted to the Certificate for Achievement and Excellence of Financial Reporting with Government Finance Officers Association. City's independent auditing firm, Allen Gibson Hulick, LC, completed the audit of 2022 financial records. Brian Holst, Vice President Assurance of Allen Gibson Hulick, is here tonight to give you a presentation on the 22 audit.
Thank you, Matt.
All right. So included with your agenda today were 3 letters that we issued in connection with the audit. The first one's the governance letter, which is about 5 pages and mostly encompasses the stuff that I'm going to talk about today. Also in there is your financial statement opinion, which is kind of the big piece from us that goes into your report, and then also your government auditing standards report on internal control and compliance. So like I said, we're going to spend most of the time talking about what's in the governance letter. However, with that said, on the next slide, the main thing I wanted to kind of go over first is the financial statement opinion, which is kind of what everybody else wants to know as far as the results of the audit. As far as that goes, it was a unmodified or clean opinion, which doesn't sound super fancy, but that's what you want. So there's nothing sort of negative or anything controversial or anything we need to report today as far as the financial statements go, so always good news. As far as the rest of the stuff in the governance letter, that sort of covers the things that our auditing standards either recommend or require that we go over with you today. The first of those things on page 1 just kind of talks about our overall responsibilities with regards to the audit, a little bit of the plan, scope, and timing, and the letters in which we communicated that to you initially. The next section talks about accounting policies and procedures. And the biggest thing there this year is the adoption of or change in accounting policies. There was a fairly significant change this year, which was GASB statement number 87, which changed the way that you report leases. And essentially that resulted in, under the new standard, about $1.6 million worth of right to use assets and associated lease liabilities, and about $51,000 worth of lease receivables with an associated deferred inflow. Of that, though, about, I think, 1.3 million or so was already sort of recorded on your financial statements in the past under the old rules. So of that 1.6 million, it's somewhat similar to what you've kind of seen in the past. It's just reported in a different spot. With that, though, there's a whole new footnote, which is footnote 11 this year, that kind of explains some of those lease agreements. And then also several changes to some of the other footnotes, like footnote 1, where it talks about your overall policies. There's some new wording in there regarding leases. And then in footnote 4 and 12, which is capital assets and debt, there's sort of new sections there corresponding to the new things related to the lease standard. So got through all of that, did result in a little bit of an adjustment to beginning net position. And again, that's just because of the things that you were already recording under the old lease standards and how those changed. Once we recorded them under the new standards, there was a little bit of difference in cost. So there was an adjustment to beginning net position for that. Any questions on that? I know that was kind of a big change, so before I move on to anything else, just want to make sure there weren't any questions or anything. Okay. The next page in the governance letter kind of talks about our estimates, or the city's estimates, and what we've done to sort of look at those. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on those. It does take up most of the page, though. But mostly it's your pension and other post-employment benefit liabilities, and then also the allowance for uncollectible receivables. The big thing on that page, which is at the bottom and doesn't take up a ton of space, though, is that there weren't any audit adjustments or uncorrected misstatements as the result of our audit, which is always good news. Means finance did a good job of getting everything in there and recorded correctly. So didn't have anything to report there. The next section is where we kind of talk about any issues or disagreements or anything, findings that came up in our audit. So again, I'm happy to report that there weren't any this year. As far as we were concerned, everything went pretty smoothly as far as the audit. Nothing really came up that we felt like needed to be communicated to you today. So again, that's always good news. The next section, kind of before we finish going through that letter, did want to talk a little bit about the government auditing standards report on internal control and compliance, because that's sort of a follow-up to if we have any findings or comments or suggestions, that's the report that we would put them in. So again, that's a clean report this year, no findings, no concerns. And what we kind of wanted to point out here was that, we're looking at the policies and procedures that the city has. We're looking at how they're recording transactions, looking at all of the disclosures sort of as part of that compliance piece of that report. So the fact that, again, we don't have anything to report in it to you today is definitely good news and kind of speaks highly of the quality of your finance department and their ability to kind of put all this together for us to audit. Also in the letter, in the report, not in the letter, is some of the new GASB pronouncements that are coming out over the next few years. Those first two, the public-private, public-public partnership, and the subscription-based IT arrangements are the two that are due next year. And potentially, those could have some impact on your financials. The IT arrangement one is basically leases just for IT software. So it's kind of the same general idea as what you implemented this year for leases. It's just more for that intangible software type stuff. The public-private partnership one is related to things like parking garages, for example, if you had one and you hired somebody to run it for you, or if they paid you up front so that they had the ability to run it. So those types of situations where there's sort of publicly provided services that you're hiring or outsourcing out to other entities. So that one's not quite as common. I suspect almost everybody's going to have the subscription-based IT arrangements. There's some very specific requirements for the public-private partnership stuff, so while it certainly, there's going to be some of those that exist in general, they're probably not going to be nearly as common as the IT stuff. The other things I don't see a huge change, especially in the short term for, but we did list out all the ones that are effective that haven't been implemented yet. The last few pages in our letter just kind of talk about some of the things that I'll say, I don't want to say they're generic and that we give them to everybody because they're important enough that we wanted to put them in the letter, but they're not the result of things that we found as part of your audit. So the first one is cybersecurity risk, which mostly, while it's not new by any means, I think COVID, with everybody going more remote, has kind of caused it to be more front and center lately. In fact, just the other day I saw that there were some Russian hackers that had some kind of file sharing software that they were taking advantage of that included things like the British Broadcasting Company, the U.S. Department of Energy. Mizzou is where I went, which is why I saw it. They were part of that hack too. So it's just at that point where even if you have good policies and procedures, it's so prevalent now with the ransomware and everything else to just make sure you're staying on top of it. So we always feel like it's important enough to kind of put that reminder in there just to keep it on everybody's mind. And then the next section is the comprehensive policy and procedure review. And going back to kind of talking about our compliance report, really as part of the audit, we're looking at those processes and procedures, but we're not really taking a deep dive into, could this be better or could you do this instead? It's really more just understanding the processes so that we can perform our financial audit. So there's always maybe that ability to kind of look deeper into things. But again, those aren't listed because of issues or concerns that we had as part of the audit. So I do want to make that clear that I'm not saying you need this or that there were issues that we found and so you absolutely have to go get this, just kind of some best practice suggestions. The last page then lists our AGH University website, which has free CPE and webinars that you can go out and kind of watch anytime. The CPE versions of them, you have to watch them live, but you can always go back and watch things later as rebroadcasts. With that said, I think that was all I specifically had to go over today, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I would like to say, though, thank you to Matt and Nancy and the rest of the finance department. We can't do our job without their assistance, and I think things went really smooth, and we definitely appreciate their help.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Council, do you have any questions?
Thorough audit,
Very thorough, yeah.
and it's kind of the same old song. I mean, we get used to it, not having any audit issues or any audit points from our award-winning finance team, but hats off again to you and Nancy and the rest of the staff for another job well done.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.